Good morning. I'm News Center's Don Carrigan, and we are here for this week's edition of Political Brew. I'm sitting in for Pat Callaghan, who unfortunately has an injured flipper. He injured himself in a fall while walking his dog on a snowy day. We wish Pat a quick recovery on that. Joined as we are every week by our political analysts, Phil Harriman and John Richardson. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
A lot going on in Washington. Big week. We've got President Trump giving out the framework of his budget. We've got more going on with the Republican health care plan and related issues. Let's start with the budget. President giving out at least the indication what's going to be in the budget. No surprise, more money for the military, less money for the State Department, for the Department of Agriculture, and a number of other state departments, including a 30% cut to the Environmental Protection Agency. Should we be surprised? Phil, I'll start with you as the Republican. Should we be surprised by any of this?
No, and I think it's probably just beginning, Don. We've been talking about the national debt and the deficits. We're in the trillions of dollars. We can't balance our budget or even get close to paying off our debts if we don't make some hard choices. I think you're going to find the Trump administration you'll hear people crying out loud over all of these departments because we need to get the government in a size we can afford to pay.
So it sounds like you agree with what he's doing.
Well, I haven't seen the specifics. In fact, what we do know so far, Dawn, is that these are leaked documents. These aren't official, unveiling of the budget. I want to wait till I see what's in it.
John.
Well, I mean, we know that the president proposes a budget, and of course the legislature, in this case Congress, disposes of it. So, you're going to put out a budget that maybe met what you said you would do when you ran for president. But, it's going to be a vastly different budget by the time the House and Senate get their hands on it. For instance, public television, that cuts to that. Cuts to Planned Parenthood, cuts to the arts. Those are things that are routinely supported by both Democrats and Republicans.
And in the scheme of things, those are very small amounts of money.
Well, in the scheme of things, let's hope that the Congress actually passes a budget. They haven't had a budget in, 4 or 5 years?
They haven't. I mean, and 10% for the military, and then you're making deep cuts to the State Department. You're really taking, both arms and legs off the State Department to do diplomacy, to make sure that things get done in each of these countries in a way that you don't want the military going in to do. So I think it's a little short-sighted. It sounds good politically. We're going to improve the military, but I think cooler heads will prevail when it goes to Congress, and you're going to see more money put back into the State Department.
Well, to Phil's point, do you think is there any likelihood that Congress will actually pass a budget?
If the past 20 to 30 years is any indication, the answer is no. And I think that unfortunately, you have health care leading. We found out when Clinton was trying to lead with health care what happened. We found out when Obama led with health care what happened. I mean, their popularity went down, and frankly, Trump can't afford much going down any further in his popularity. Right. I think that he really needs to focus because health care is going to take up some of that budget.
Well, let's talk about that. Congressional Budget Office came out with its estimates on the cost and impact of the House Republican health care plan. Didn't make the Republican plan look very good, said it would eventually save billions and billions of dollars, but quite a ways off, take millions of people off the plan, off of coverage. And the Trump administration said, well, you can't, they're wrong, Congressional Budget Office is wrong. Even Congressman Callaghan suggested in a radio interview that you shouldn't listen to their numbers. So, Phil, is this steamroller is going to keep going forward?
There's no question about it. And, I'm not one to defend a government bureaucracy that I have no experience having worked with, and that's the Congressional Budget Office. They calculate what the impact is to the national budget, debt or revenue, by what they call static accounting. They look at what's going on right now. They do not take into account what may unfold in the future, and that's why I think these numbers are so far off.
So you don't trust their numbers?
Well, history has proven, whether it's Obamacare or Medicare or Medicaid, the congressional budget numbers were off big time.
John?
I mean, this plan that
does it doom the thing in the Senate?
I think it dooms it for this reason. I think that if you're elderly, if you're young, if you're sick, this is a horrible plan for you, this Republican plan. The only way it works is for the young who don't use services. So we're going to see even Republicans moving to make changes. Yes, the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare as we call it, needed changes, but this wholesale change that they're trying to make, I think it's dead on arrival.
So then who's going to come up with the replacement?
I think we're going to limp along.
John Richardson's going to do it, yeah.
Yeah, you could look for me to do it, but that would take a long time. I won't take a 1,300-mile car ride with you, Phil, down to D.C. to do it. But the point is that I think it's going to take a while, and I don't think we're going to see a quick fix, not within this session.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in the next segment. And good morning again. I'm News Center's Don Carrigan, sitting in for Pat Callaghan on our edition of Political Brew for this week with Phil Harriman and John Richardson. A lot going on in Augusta too. No real big things this week, but a lot moving around. More action on the Real ID proposal. The Legislative Committee was going to discuss it, work on it. Meanwhile, two senators, as we talk about strange political bedfellows, Liberal Democrat Senator Shannon Bellows, Conservative Libertarian Republican Eric Brakey, holding a press conference Thursday saying they're going to try to enlist people from other states to send a letter to the president wanting him to block sanctions on this. What do we think? Does the legislature have any choice but to comply?
Well, I think, Dawn, there's the philosophical and then there's the practical. Yeah. The philosophical is the two senators you just mentioned can send letters and feel good about protecting privacy, as we all want. Right. The practical is that the federal government is not going to allow us to walk onto a military base or an airplane or a nuclear power plant or some other secure...
Some federal offices.
Right. So we got to have a real ID.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
You agree, John?
I do. I mean, 15 years ago, when we were concerned about privacy, these were real concerns. And 45 states now have conformed. These concerns have not materialized. People have gone along.
Although people are more concerned than ever about the idea of having their information hacked because it keeps happening.
But it's secure within the state of Maine. Within our borders, we have our own security, and it only stays within the state. And I'm very comfortable that way, and I think we can protect it. But I think it's time to conform, and I think that for commerce and other simple common sense reasons, and give credit to the two senators. They feel strongly about this. This is where the far right meets the far left, usually on property interests and also privacy interests. Yep. Good for them. I'm not sure it'll go very far, but I appreciate what they're doing.
All right, next issue, supplemental budget. The supplemental budget, which is for the remainder of this year, although some money carries over, has now become law, but without the governor's signature. Any surprise in that?
No, I think he's not signed a few of these budgets. He's let those budgets go through without his signatures. And I think so as a result, I'm not surprised that he would not sign on to this one.
Phil?
Yeah, he's being consistent in that regard, but I think the secret that most Mainers may not be aware of is that under the LePage administration, where he came in to office with very little money in the reserve account, the so-called rainy day fund for unforeseen challenges in the state of Maine, I think he's got almost $1 billion set aside in that budget.
That was the state's cash pool.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right.
But
that's right. You're the State House reporter.
But it's well over $100 million, and this supplemental budget puts more into it.
That's tremendous news.
Let's talk about the governor. He and Commissioner Mayhew went to Washington last week. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan wouldn't meet with them to talk about the health care plan. They did talk with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. John, do you think they accomplished what they wanted?
I think they fell a little short. I think they tried a good attempt to try to make put the best case forward for Riverview. They lost $20 million because they did not conform to what the federal government said they should do in the audit and elsewhere. This has been a long time coming, a long fight. I know that the governor suggested that somehow this was retaliation for not signing on to Obamacare, but I don't think so. I think there are so many inherent problems at Riverview that the federal government finally said enough.
But federal DHHS could still reinstate it too.
They could, and certainly he went down to make the case. Right. I think that unfortunately that case fell short, and I think that was the message coming back from D.C.
Yeah.
I don't know how you saw it.
Well, regarding the governor wanting to meet with the Speaker Ryan, I know how that feels. I go down to Washington from time to time to meet with Senators King and Collins, and I don't always get a meeting or always get my answers that I'm looking for. So I don't see that as an indication of whether he was successful. I do think meeting with the Secretary of Health and Human Services was effective because of all the things that John has said. And, let's be candid. This, at the end of the day, Washington is about politics. And politically speaking, the Obama administration made it difficult, for whatever reasons, justified or not, to make it impossible for the governor to get the Riverview approved. It sounds like going with this administration, he may have some success.
Yeah, and so they clearly he's trying to make bridges with that federal
Sure.
government,
No
even though
question.
he's always not happy about the federal government. Let's talk about your winners and losers. We've got a little less than a minute to go. John, I know you had one, so you start.
I do. I mean, I saw recently that 2 congressmen from Texas, one Democrat, one Republican, made a 1,300-mile trip from Texas to D.C.
Road trip together.
It was a road trip together. They had a playlist. They talked politics. They talked personal ambitions. They talked about their personal lives. It brought both of them together. And in the end, they were able to say, these are the things we think we can work on.
So we need like 200 of those trips happening, right? All over
I can tell you, I've never taken a trip 1,300 miles with Phil. But
there's time left to do it.
I hate to do this because it's part of our sister affiliates at NBC, at the MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. She's got to be the loser of the week. She had everybody tuning into her show to hear about Donald Trump's tax return. Come to find out, he's paid 25% of his income in taxes. Who knew? Hillary thought he paid 0. He actually paid $35 million.
At least in that year.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And do you think he leaked that?
I don't know, but boy,
Yes.
that would.
You do.
I do. He has a history of leaking information to his benefit, and I think he did in this case.
So interesting. Thank you both very
to see you,
much.
Don.
Have a great week. There's going to be a lot happening. Big hearing in Augusta on Monday on proposals to eliminate that 3% income tax increase. A lot to talk about. We'll be back next week with more of our Political Brew.